But the gallows accomplished what years of naval warfare never could. As captured pirates swung from execution dock and their bodies slowly decayed inside rusted iron gibbets, the dream of life beneath the black flag began to die with them. Sailors who once chased treasure now feared capture more than any storm or battle. The Golden Age of Piracy did not end only through cannon and warships, but through a punishment so terrifying that it shattered the spirit of piracy across the Atlantic forever.
Enjoy the video, and don't forget to subscribe.
Trace your finger along the map from Nassau across the Atlantic and picture the year 1722 as the smell of rotting oak, boiling pine tar, damp hemp rigging, stale bilge water, and lingering sulfur drifted beneath low gray clouds while snapping canvas echoed across cold swells. Few fates terrified pirate crews more than surviving capture, because death in battle often lasted only seconds, while imprisonment beneath the authority of the British Admiralty could stretch into months of hunger, disease, humiliation, and psychological torment before the final execution at execution dock. Many experienced sea robbers openly confessed that they would rather sink beneath the Atlantic than fall alive into naval hands. This fear was rooted not in legend, but in harsh reality. During the final years of the Golden Age of Piracy between roughly 1718 and 1722, Royal Navy patrols expanded dramatically, deploying heavily armed sixth-rate frigates and swift sloops carrying crews exceeding 150 men. Pirate vessels, commonly displacing between 80 and 120 tons with pronounced tumble-home, supported by massive white oak futtocks fastened using hand-forged iron spikes nearly 11 inches long, could outrun merchantmen but rarely escaped disciplined naval squadrons forever. Once boarding hooks secured the shattered rail and Marines stormed across splintered decks with fixed bayonets, every surviving pirate immediately understood that the battle had ended, but true suffering had only begun. The Articles of Agreement that had promised equal shares and democratic votes vanished beneath the absolute authority of the Crown, while every soaked rope, broken mast, shattered gun carriage, and blood-stained plank became silent evidence destined to condemn them before the law. The first hours after capture followed an almost ritual pattern perfected through decades of naval warfare. Officers demanded the surrender of every cutlass, boarding axe, flintlock pistol, powder horn, and marlinspike before forcing exhausted prisoners to kneel beneath armed sentries. Their wrists were secured with coarse hemp cord or forged iron manacles whose weight often exceeded 8 pounds, rubbing skin raw whenever the ship rolled across heavy seas. Below deck, the prisoners entered a world of darkness where fresh air barely reached through narrow hatchways. The same hold that had once carried barrels of salted beef, powder casks, and replacement spars now became a floating prison. Moisture condensed across oak ceiling planks and dripped steadily onto the captives while rats searched every corner for crumbs. Food consisted of hard biscuit, frequently infested with weevils, salted meat preserved months earlier, and stagnant water stored inside oak barrels whose iron hoops had slowly rusted in the humid Atlantic climate. Every barrel had originally been assembled from carefully seasoned white oak staves compressed beneath heated hoops, yet even a Kawappa's finest craftsmanship could not prevent water from absorbing foul tastes after months at sea. Disease spread rapidly through cramped compartments lacking proper ventilation. Fever, dysentery, infected wounds, and scurvy weakened men long before their trial. Above them, sailors continuously maintained the captured vessel, driving oakum deep into open seams with caulking irons before sealing them beneath boiling pine tar during later careening operations, replacing fractured deadies, tightening chain plates, and inspecting every futtock supporting the hull. The pirates listened helplessly as the very ship that had once symbolized freedom was methodically restored so it could carry them toward judgment rather than escape. For many prisoners, the voyage to port proved more terrifying than the coming execution because every passing day stripped away another illusion of hope. Captains of Royal Navy warships meticulously preserved evidence, recording the seizure of black flags, forged commissions, stolen cargo, navigational charts, and pirate articles of agreement that openly demonstrated criminal intent. Experienced pursers catalogued muskets, bronze cannon, and powder stores with remarkable precision. A typical pirate culverin cast from bronze, containing roughly 88% copper and 10% tin, rested upon an oak truck carriage secured by breeching ropes exceeding 1 inch in diameter. Every charge contained black powder carefully measured at approximately 75% saltpeter, 15% charcoal, and 10% sulfur. When ignited by the flintlock mechanism, the sulfur accelerated combustion, while expanding gases hurled an iron round shot through the muzzle with enough force to shatter white oak planking, tearing long splinters from the hull that became secondary missiles capable of killing more sailors than the cannonball itself. These technical details fascinated naval investigators because every weapon connected surviving pirates to specific attacks. Upon reaching Jamaica, Barbados, Boston, or London, prisoners were marched through crowded streets beneath heavy guard. Curious civilians gathered by the hundreds to stare at filthy, bearded men whose terrifying reputations had traveled farther than they ever had. Shackles clanged against stone pavements while spectators shouted insults, prayers, or demands for vengeance. Many pirates later admitted that this slow public humiliation crushed their spirit more completely than any broadside ever had, because they understood that they were no longer feared masters of the sea, but defeated criminals awaiting a sentence that almost never failed to end at the gallows. Trials before the High Court of Admiralty rarely resembled the dramatic courtroom scenes imagined centuries later, because the evidence had usually been gathered long before the accused entered the chamber. Witnesses included surviving merchant captains, naval officers, sailors rescued from captured vessels, and sometimes former pirates who accepted royal pardons in exchange for testimony. Every stolen manifest, damaged compass, blood-stained boarding axe, and signed confession strengthened the prosecution. Letters of marque became a central point of argument because many prisoners falsely claimed they had acted as privateers. Yet once those commissions expired or were violated through attacks on friendly shipping, they offered no legal protection whatsoever. Judges examined dates with extraordinary care, comparing voyages against Admiralty records and sworn depositions. A pirate who had once commanded a swift 90-ton sloop carrying 12 bronze cannon and nearly 100 desperate men now stood silently while clerks described every robbery in painstaking detail. The psychological burden became unbearable because the condemned already knew the sentence before it was spoken. Hanging awaited nearly every convicted pirate, but execution itself represented only part of the punishment. Authorities deliberately transformed death into a warning designed to terrorize every sailor crossing the Atlantic. Iron gibbets weighing close to 100 pounds were forged by blacksmiths using thick wrought bars bent into crude human shapes before being secured upon towering wooden posts overlooking busy waterways. Bodies placed inside these cages remained exposed to rain, salt wind, blazing sunlight, insects, scavenging birds, and the changing tides for months or even years. Veteran pirates understood this fate long before entering the courtroom, which explains why so many had once sworn that they would gladly accept a cannonball through the chest, drowning beneath shattered wreckage, or even the jaws of sharks rather than survive long enough to witness the gallows awaiting them. Execution dock completed the terror that capture had begun. Before sunrise, the condemned were loaded into small boats and rowed along the Thames as church bells echoed across the water and thousands gathered to witness the final spectacle. Each pirate was led onto the scaffold with a coarse hemp noose placed around his neck while marshals read the sentence one final time. The hanging itself was intentionally slow, leaving many victims struggling for several agonizing minutes before silence finally settled over the crowd. Yet even death was not the end. The bodies were stripped of ordinary burial and transferred into heavy wrought iron gibbets suspended beside the river where every incoming tide washed beneath them. Salt spray coated the iron, gulls tore at exposed flesh, and relentless wind slowly reduced human remains to bleached bone. Merchant crews sailing toward London passed these grim monuments for years, recognizing familiar faces that had once commanded feared pirate sloops across the Caribbean. Every creaking gibbet reminded sailors that the Crown intended not merely to kill pirates, but to erase the romance of piracy itself through public horror. Long before the rope tightened around their necks, captured pirates understood exactly what awaited them, and that certainty explains why so many begged for a quick death in battle or beneath the waves instead of surviving to face the unbearable journey from capture to the gallows. For the governments that crushed the Golden Age of Piracy, this strategy proved devastatingly effective. Cannon, frigates, and disciplined marines defeated pirate ships, but fear of capture destroyed pirate recruitment. Young sailors who once dreamed of easy treasure now imagined rusted iron gibbets swaying above crowded harbors, their victims slowly disappearing beneath storms, salt, and scavenging birds. Veterans who had witnessed these dreadful displays carried the stories across every Atlantic port, warning that surviving defeat was worse than dying in combat. By the mid-1720s, the Black Flag no longer represented freedom to most seamen, but a nearly certain path toward public disgrace and an agonizing execution. The Atlantic swallowed countless pirate wrecks, yet the greater weapon was psychological. The certainty of capture, trial, hanging, and posthumous display broke the confidence that had sustained piracy for a generation. That is why so many captured pirates pleaded for death at sea, knowing that the ocean could offer a swift grave, while the law promised months of suffering followed by a fate designed to haunt every sailor who passed beneath their weathered remains.